And here I thought I would be spending time talking about AJ Pollock's 2022 season. Boy, was I wrong. Lots of rumors, reports, and sources pointing to the Chicago White Sox hiring not Kevin Long or Ozzie Guillen or Carlos Mendoza, but Kansas City Royals bench coach Pedro Grifol as their next manager. How does Grifol stack up in regards to the qualifications that were laid out by Rick Hahn in early October? Grifol is a different hire for the White Sox, and is this just the beginning of a different culture on the South Side?
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Pedro Grifol could very well be announced as the next White Sox manager before the World Series is over. He has spent several years with the Kansa City Royals organization and has not managed in the big leagues before. How do Kansas City Royals fans view this potential hire by the White Sox? Boy, if you're just joining Locked On White Sox, if it's been a while and you forgot, let me remind you quickly. The Chicago White Sox were 81-81 this past season, second place in the AL Central, finished 11 games back of the Cleveland Guardians. Chicago White Sox managerial search 2022 looks to be coming to a close if all the sources and rumors are indeed correct. Tuesday was pretty wild. Lots of information flying all over the place. You could really get whiplash following all the reports and rumors. I saw this from Bruce Levine Tuesday morning early. This is what he had to say on Twitter. According to sources, Yankees bench coach Carlos Mendoza interviewed with the White Sox 12 days ago. White Sox candidate Ozzie Guillen and Mendoza are old winter ball pals. John Heyman first to report the White Sox got permission to talk with Mendoza. Mendoza has not had a second interview. Then everything changed as news began to leak that the White Sox will be naming Kansas City Royals bench coach Pedro Grifol as their next manager. This was from Buster Only on Twitter. Pedro Grifol, longtime coach with the Royals, is expected to be the next White Sox manager, an announcement that could come later this week. And then Ken Rosenthal jumped in saying sources confirm a Royals bench coach Pedro Grifol expected to be named White Sox manager. A number of White Sox coaches not being asked back. Pitching coach Ethan Katz expected to return. Rosenthal credited Buster Only with breaking the news first. Chuck Garfien jumped in on things, backing up Rosenthal's comment by tweeting, "I'm hearing that Ethan Katz will return as White Sox pitching coach." More rumors and reports that former Blue Jays manager Charlie Montoyo will be the next bench coach for the Chicago White Sox. And then, of course, the White Sox whisperer Bob Nightingale chimed in, saying in a tweet, Pedro Grifol blew away the White Sox during his interview and was the consensus choice among Jerry Reisndorf, Ken Williams, and Rick Hahn. Perhaps this is just Bob telling us what the organization and By organization, I mean Jerry wants us to hear. It's hard for me to believe that everybody was on board with this. I did check in with Ryan Stiles, who hosted Locked On Royals, to get his quick perspective on Pedro Grifol and why he might have been passed up by Kansas City in favor of Matt Quatraro. This is what Stiles had to say. As long as Pedro has been in Kansas City, he has been viewed as a great coach and a great guy, so everyone is extremely happy for him. As for why they didn't just promote him, I know they interviewed him for the position, but maybe at 52 years old, he feels like this is his only shot to make it as a manager and wanted to pick a place that's actually set up to win. It would be interesting to know if he was one that turned down Kansas City or if Kansas City didn't offer it to him, but he seems like a good manager potentially. Stiles brings up a great point there. When I first heard about the news, I just assumed that Pedro Grifol was passed up by the Kansas City Royals, but maybe it was actually the other way around. Maybe Grifol got a better offer from the White Sox and views the White Sox as a very much in contention. The window is wide open, unlike where the Kansas City Royals are at. Pedro Grifol has no connections to the Chicago White Sox organization. I'm going to tell you why hiring Grifol takes the White Sox in a much different direction. More on that in a moment. Dress shirts are tricky. It's hard to find one that fits just right while also being comfortable and matches your style. Plus, with all the hustle and bustle you got going on, you need a dress shirt that looks good enough to get the deal done at work, but is comfortable enough to play catch with your kid after dropping him off at practice. The dress shirt was due for a radical reinvention, and Roan stepped up to the challenge. Roan's commuter shirt is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible shirt known to man, and here's why. Mobility is everything. Roan's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. Looking good is easy. It's time to feel confident with a wrinkle-free shirt without the hassle. With Roan's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the shirt. It's that easy. Odor-free tech with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. You'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. The commuter shirt can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/lockedon and use promo code LOCKEDON to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to Roan, RHONE.com/lockedon and use code LOCKEDON. The website MLB Trade Rumors was all over the Pedro Grifol information as well, putting out some background info on Grifol. Grifol will turn 53 later this month, has been with the Royals organization since 2013, and has served as a quality control coach, a catching coach, and bench coach along the way. He's also spent extensive time in the Mariners organization, where he spent 3 seasons as a minor league manager before being named the club's coordinator of minor league instructor and eventually director of minor league operations. Prior to his work with the Mariners and Royals organizations, Grifol had a 9-year playing career, selected by the Twins out of Florida State University in the 6th round of the 1991 draft. Grifol spent 5 seasons as a catcher in the Twins system and another 4 in the Mets system. He reached AAA with both clubs, but never cracked the majors before ending his playing career following the 1999 season. So Pedro Grifol is not the exciting name that I think a lot of fans were hoping for. He doesn't have managerial experience per se, and his organizational success came back in 2015 when the Royals won the World Series. So, I'm curious to hear from Rick Hahn and Pedro Grifol himself when things are made official. Hahn outlined several qualifications that would be critical in the White Sox managerial search back in early October. Let's take a look. Hahn said, quote, ideally, the right candidate has recent experience in the dugout on a championship level team, end quote. Well, Kansas City went to the World Series in 2014, lost, and then went right back to the World Series in 2015 and won. Then in 2016, the Royals went 81-81. Royals lost 100 games in 2019 and in 2020. They are obviously heading in a different direction than the White Sox. Another statement from Hahn in terms of qualifications, quote, ultimately, I think the best candidate or the ideal candidate is going to be someone who has experience with a championship organization in recent years. Recent October experience with a championship organization would be ideal, but we're going to keep an open mind, end quote. They definitely kept an open mind. Again, the Royals, nothing recent since 2015, so 7 years ago. Another Hahn qualification here, quote, we have been insular in our past hirings. That's objectively true, and no one can run from that, end quote. This is definitely an outside of the box hire for sure. And if this prompts other changes to the coaching staff, I view that as a major positive. Something else from Hahn, quote, I think we are going to use this opportunity to get different perspectives, new way of looking at things, a little different from those who have been a little more insular to the organization, end quote. Well, the White Sox have definitely done that. If this is going to be their new manager, this will be a whole new perspective. Pedro Grifol really is a mystery to a lot of us and can be seen as a confusing choice, as the White Sox must take advantage of their window of opportunity. There's no time to waste, and a first-time manager from the Kansa City Royals organization will definitely be met with a lot of early skepticism. However, I do like what I'm hearing right now, that the coaching staff will be flipped, and it looks like Pedro Grifol will have a say-so in who comes on board. Grifol may not check all the boxes that Rick Hahn laid out, but I'm going to tell you why he should be viewed as a breath of fresh air. More on that in a moment. Personally, I like the Pedro Grifol hire over bringing in a hitting coach like Kevin Long. I like the bench coach hire here. Grifol's lack of experience troubles me, but I'm excited that he could be surrounding himself with fresh faces that I hope he will have a hand in hiring. Going outside the organization is great. It's refreshing, but simply placing a new manager into the same old system doesn't work. There needs to be real change, and hopefully the White Sox front office will not stop at Pedro Grifol. What has Pedro Grifol said? This is from a recent article by Max Riper from SB Nation's Royals Review. Grifol has served as the connective tissue between the Royals analytics department and the on-field staff. He was part of the push to implement defensive shifts and sought to improve Salvi Perez's framing. This is from Grifol, quote, I love combining the old-fashioned gut feel and looking at the large sample numbers to see how they match, end quote. Grifol, the 52-year-old Miami native, is well-liked among players and is bilingual, often serving as a translator for Spanish-speaking players. In addition to the Royals and White Sox, Grifol was interviewed for the managerial opening with the Miami Marlins this offseason. The Chicago White Sox were 9-10 against the Royals in 2022 and 2021. Kansas City has given the White Sox problems for a long time, and the White Sox have obviously seen a lot of them. So maybe the front office has had their eye on Pedro Grifol for a while now. If it is indeed Grifol, I hope he has some say in his coaching staff, and perhaps a fresh perspective will be helpful. Pedro Grifol is a step in a different direction, And hopefully it will be just the beginning to a new culture and a new way of thinking on the South Side. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll continue to look at player performances like A.J. Pollock. We'll try that again unless some other big news breaks. And as always, examining off-season White Sox scenarios. Hey, really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, and until next time, go Sox.